Let me ask you a question, John. If I told you right now to walk up to any one of these books, now not physically, but mentally, and I want you to flip it open to any page, to look at that page and to go back and forth and stop at any word, can you see this happening? Close your eyes and in your mind's eye, envision that occurring. I want to show them at home because people will say later that I changed what I wrote somehow.
All right.
Open your eyes. What was that word?
Hell, dude. This is not staged. This is crazy. I'm blown away. All right, welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Ballen. This was such a hit on the last episode with Tom Segura that we decided we would do more. And today's guest, I got to be honest, they're going to blow your mind. Seriously, I went into this experience sort of skeptical. I mean, the things this person does are sort of impossible. I mean, he goes in front of these audiences, which include huge celebrities and professional sports teams, and effectively reads their minds. He certainly blows their minds. And he does it under so much pressure, and he nails it every time. And so we asked him on the show. He's got some amazing stories, and he also truly I have something written on my hand right now that has to do with one of the tricks that he pulled on me, and it's just, I can't believe how this episode went. So really stick around. He's an amazing guy and just a master of his craft. He's going to blow your mind. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
I'm Oz the Mentalist. I'm here on Storytime with Mr. Ballen. I already know what you're thinking. Stick around.
All right, Oz the Mentalist Perlman.
Yeah.
So you are the world's greatest mentalist. I mean, lately I have seen you pop up all over the place. You were just on Joe Rogan and his reaction to when he guesses his
Pissed
ATM.
off. Joe, you have not seen him that angry in a while. You know, he goes down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and he was like, did you hack me? Have you literally gotten into my life? How did you get my PIN code?
I liked how you were like, hey, let's just be spontaneous. You're like, look, I'm gonna try to guess your ATM PIN code. And you can just see it on Joe. He's like, okay, all right, let's see. And you guessed the first number at some point. You're like, just tell me, is it 1? I think it was 1.
Yep.
And he's like, all right. But then as soon as you began doing it, you could just see his whole mentality, everything shifted. And you can just see as the audience, if this is staged, it's the best staging I've ever seen, because his reaction was not pleasure. It was like, stop.
How'd I do, Joe? Is that your ATM PIN code?
Yeah. That's weird. I'm skeptical because I've got that PIN code in the mail. You know?
People loved seeing it because with Joe, he is the ultimate debunker.
Yeah.
Are we in agreement? Like, no one's going on Joe Rogan and telling Joe what to do.
No.
On the biggest platform in the world, that he is the boss, and he didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that's what captivated the public. Is if he would have been amazed, that's one thing, but he was angry and a little scared.
So tell me, like, what is a mentalist?
Right.
Because I've looked it up.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really accomplish the task here. I want to hear from you. And secondarily, how does one know they have the skill to be a mentalist?
So a mentalist is a form of magic, right?
Okay.
This is not in the world of psychics and supernatural. That's not what I pretend to do. I completely make sure that I go out of my way to ensure people understand I'm not claiming to be a psychic. I'm not supernatural. Instead, I have a series of skills that I've developed, kind of like an arsenal of tools over decades of learning how people think, and it's grounded in magic. So everyone knows what a magician is, right? You could go to an 8-year-old, they've started to see magic tricks. And when we watch magic, we understand that we're being fooled with our eyes. Somehow this person knows how to do things quickly or to distract me so they do something somewhere else, right? When you cut the woman in half, spoiler alert, guys, I'm not trying to ruin Christmas. There's no Santa Claus. You're not really cutting the woman in half. Somehow you're deceiving me with an illusion. That's the name of the word. That's really what it's called. So magic is all about misdirection and fooling the eyes. This is a specialized subset within magic where it's magic of the mind. Very different. I'm not fooling your eyes because there's no fast hands. There's almost no props. I can show up. I had a show last night in Toronto. Came right here from the airport where I did a show. It was a smaller group, about 400 people. And I show up with nothing. I have a pad of paper and a marker, which if I don't have with me, they can grab for me.
Yeah.
The show isn't props. I'm the show. And so what I've learned to do is know how people think. And by knowing effectively how people think, I'll know what they think. And I'll present that in a very entertaining, fooling, and hopefully memorable manner. So mentalism is psychology, misdirection, deception, influence. It's all these different skills baked into one cake.
And is this something that you always knew you possessed, some skills that ultimately crystallized and became you being the world's greatest mentalist?
Right. Thank you.
Did you have moments in your life before this became a thing where you're like, I have these innate skills that I
Sure.
could refine, but you knew you had them? Or is this something that people could be taught?
Absolutely, people can be taught. So this is a learnable skill, but I would liken it to musical talent, which is innate in a sense, which is you could probably learn to play the piano and do a certain number of songs. Like my 9-year-old plays the piano. If I continued practicing every day for a year, I'd probably get better. But what if I practiced for a decade? Would I ever be good enough to play at Carnegie Hall in New York City? I don't think I would. I think that it's not in me, that innate God-given gift, whatever you want to call it. You can develop the skills, but will you get to a certain level? There might be a ceiling.
Sure.
So that's the best way to describe it. I have a gift for it, and I've also been very, very persistent, and never underestimate the power of persistence, because mentalism has a steep learning curve, and most people don't have thick enough skin to get through the times when you suck. So magic can be practiced over and over and over in a mirror, and you can improve because it's move-based. It's kind of like playing golf. If you practice your swing, hopefully by the millionth swing, you're gonna be great. You might not be Rory McIlroy or Tiger Woods. With this, the only way that I can get better is by doing it for an audience. Do you see what I mean? You can't practice guessing what people are gonna think without people. And the first few 100 times you do it, you're gonna eat, pardon my French, you're gonna eat shit. Like you're not gonna be good. There's very few mentalists that started good. And so what tends to happen is you perform, you suck, you go, oh my God, that was painful. I don't wanna do that again. I don't wanna experience that suffering. So I did much more magic for years. And then I started dipping my toes in the water of mentalism and then doing a little more and then doing a little more. And then I was on a show, if we like rewind my career, there was a moment where it was like a fork in the road where I was on America's Got Talent.
Of course.
Changed my life. And I rebranded myself as, instead of like, quote unquote, O's the magician, I became O's the mentalist. That's how I literally monikered it, because now I differentiated myself from others and decided I'm not doing magic anymore. That was like the crutch. I just started doing just mentalism.
That's interesting. I think one of the things that I've noticed about you and your rise that's currently up and to the right, you really are killing it right now, is in a way, I feel like I can relate a little bit to the pressure that you put on yourself. And I'll give you some context. So I know that you're into distance running, in addition to like serious distance running. This dude's done like 153 miles.
It's true.
Regularly runs marathons on a whim. It is a physical feat, no doubt, but it is a mental feat more than anything else.
Agreed. It's more mental than physical. Anybody who tells me, oh, I can't do this, I'm like, that you already set yourself up. I can't. You've already created an obstacle in your mind. It's the wrong viewpoint, and your mind translates into your body. So you telling yourself that creates that. I think, the mind controls the body. I've seen people that are 20, 30 years older than me finish a race that I didn't finish. Objectively, I'm fitter than they are, I'm younger than they are, I'm stronger than they are. Why did they finish when I didn't? Because my mind crumbled.
Yeah.
And you know it. I mean, buds, how many people rang that bell?
A lot.
That were probably tough SOBs, but they didn't have it mentally.
It's true. And in fact, you had said that when you first tried the Spartathlon, 'cause you did it twice, right?
I did it twice.
So the Spartathlon's 153 miles,
Yep,
right?
153 miles, 36-hour cutoff. So it's very important. There's races that are longer. Right now, there's a heyday of people running 200-mile races, all this crazy stuff. But this, you can't slow down and walk very much. Like in these other races, they're glorified hikes. No offense to all these people who do 200s. They do it for 4 or 5 days.
Right.
Most of the people are, it's slow. This is running nonstop for a day and a half. You start on a Saturday morning, I'm running till Sunday evening.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And so like what people need to understand about running really long distances, I've done a couple marathons. And marathon is 26.2 miles.
Which is very respectable.
Totally. It's respectable.
Don't you talk down on yourself.
But when you hit about mile 20, people say that's sort of like the halfway point, even though it's not. 26.2, the halfway is 13.
Right.
But at about 20 miles is when your body sort of reaches that point where it's like, okay, we've lost all the glucose stores. We're sort of burning on muscle at this point. It's like you're falling apart. And I remember when I ran a marathon and I hit mile 20, it was like I can barely move and I have 6 miles to go.
Right.
So for anyone that's even thinking, oh, 153 miles, yeah, you just suck it up and go. That's not how that works. This is like a mental test of magnitudes you may not understand. But you had said if the first time you did the Spartathlon, you did not finish.
Didn't finish.
And you knew as you're running along, you're like, I'm not going to finish this.
Right.
And you're writing the story in your head that you're like, how am I going to spin this to the people that, they expected me to finish and I didn't.
Yes.
But you went back and you ultimately did it again and you
Right.
finished it. That's so highly unusual. One,
Right.
that you went after it in the first place, but two, that you went back and did the race. I think that says a lot about not only your mental toughness, but why you have these innate skills. You've honed those skills to become the mentalist that you are. But you obviously have this ability to put yourself in these highly mentally stressful environments and perform not just well, but at your literal best.
Right.
And so, like, dude, you go in front of an entire NFL football team. And these are also clips you got to check out if you haven't seen them, like the Bengals. You go the
one of my favorites.
And like he'll tell the players, like the quarterback Joe Burrow, and he's like, I'm going to write down who you're going to throw it to, and I'm not going to show you. You're going to do it. Throw it to anybody in the room. And then after you do it, I'm going to show you what I thought. And like the clip, you see that he's written down a name. And sure enough, he turns, he throws the football, and everyone's like, oh, he guessed it right. But then the next time you do it, you write down 2 names. And it's like, he's going to fake to this person and throw to this person, and you're holding it back. And sure enough, Joe, who clearly has no idea what you've written down,
Right.
fake, throw, room goes wild.
Tanner.
Fakes to Jamar, throws to Tanner.
How do you put yourself in that position consistently and just stay calm enough to do those things when the outcome's binary? That's so stressful. How do you do it?
So I think your mindset, and this is where the ultra running and the mentalism go hand in hand, and I think each one has improved the other. Truly, there's physiological things involved, which being able to be calm under pressure, that calmness directly creates the success in the situation, which is when you start panicking, those chemicals that flood through your body can indicate to other people the same way that animals can smell fear. They can literally smell fear. I think we still have that hardwired in us. We are still animals in a sense where we don't trust our instincts, but we can feel it. Like right now, if somebody walks in the room, even if you don't know that they're there, you have situational awareness where you can sense somebody walked in. How is that, right? It's not sonar. There's something in you that I don't know how we explain that's a sense that can indicate danger, which I'm sure you've had. You can sense on high alert and something floods you because that fight or flight. So in those situations where it's do or die, not literally, but if that screws up in that room, there's no safety net. This football team didn't walk in and get set up and say, hey guys, act excited for this random dude.
No.
Joe Burrow, the funny part about that clip was the day it dropped, the day before he signed the most lucrative contract in NFL history, $275 million with some obscene number that was guaranteed, like $184 million, fact check me. So the best comment, the comment that run up the most was go, dude, he clearly paid this guy to do it. And then my comment under to this guy was, bro, I wish I had enough money to pay Joe Burrow off to pretend to do this. And it got up like 10,000 times because it was so comical. It's like, how do you think?
Right.
The behind the scenes on that, by the way, is great because Joe is very shy. He's a great guy, but I had no time with him. And when you go to these football teams, there's a series of people that are intermediaries. I'm not talking to the players.
No.
There's the PR team, the communications team. These are organizations. And they say to you, that person doesn't want to be involved. And so I say to them, with all due respect, I'll see who wants to be involved. I say yes, but when I get in the room, my job is to convert no's into yeses, where some of the people that thought they wanted nothing to do with me, I'm going to win them over. And the Joe Burrow thing, yes, there was an amazing trick, but getting somebody who, when they sat down in their mind, said 100% no, I'm not getting involved, and then having them not only say yes to what I was going to do, buy in, but then have a monster reaction that's since been viewed hundreds of millions of times and helped change my life. That same thing, that set of skills on how to win people over, influence them, is applicable to everyone in every facet of your life. It works in business if you're doing sales. It works in relationships, whether it's people you know closely and you want to create deeper bonds, or whether it's people you want to win over, whether it's like a romantic sense, friendship sense. It's how do you meet people and connect with them in a deeper way and get them not only to like you, build rapport, but both of those two things are to do what you want them to do. Not in a nefarious way, but think about
Right.
it. I'm a parent. I'm trying to win my kids over. I'm selling them all the time my ideas, which is please do your homework right now, even though you don't want to because there's better things to do. How do you convince them in an effective manner? And that is a form of mentalism, which is knowing how people think and using it to your advantage. That's what I'm doing all the time. And those are the skills you can apply. Going back to what you said with Joe Burrow and all these situations, I have used the running to calm myself and to not think of the finish line, which is when you're at 20 miles
Yep.
and you're miserable,
Yep.
it sounds like 6 miles is so little. It's just 6 miles, man. You've done a 10K before, but in the moment, every step hurts. I'm miserable. I'm puking. I feel terrible. I want to be done now. I want to be on a couch eating ice cream now. What the hell was I thinking doing this race? I am not a superhuman. Like literally, it's the same way that a friend of mine, David Goggins, will say,
Oh, man.
I don't want to be out there running in the rain, in the cold at 4:30 a.m. But the fact that I don't want to do it is why I'm doing it. Because that's where the real training hits. The moments where it becomes hard is where you learn who you really are. When I'm sitting here talking about running, it's easy. Oh yeah, it's fun. I want to get to the moments where I'm in the deepest, darkest place and I'm asking myself, questioning, why am I doing this? Don't want to do it, and I still persevere. That's where you become stronger. It's where you tear the muscle and grow it back stronger. And those skills have allowed me, when I'm in those pressured moments, and that ultras are like something I stand on, where I'm completely calm. And I'm
Interesting.
very aligned, and I'm not going to panic. So the people around me see how calm I am, and I can still keep them within my control.
What you're doing is so stress-packed, almost on purpose.
Right.
You're going in front of this crowd that's like big professional athletes, like all these celebrities, and you're gonna like walk in and impress them and do something that's just unbelievable.
Right.
Is there thrill out of the fact that you know going into that you're gonna be calm and people will see that not only will you perform, but for you, this is what you do. Do you seek these moments out because that is empowering for you?
Man, if we got like into a therapy session of like Freudian, I keep taking big swings at things that I don't know if they're necessarily going to work.
Yeah.
But I think that the audience can sense the danger, the risk.
Yes.
That's what's exciting. And so you can feel the excitement through the camera. It's what captures you. Because I don't know, I can't explain it. It's the audience can know internally that this might have gone wrong and
yes.
it didn't. And that's why you get the big reactions.
So I've done a couple of live speaking engagements, just telling stories to crowds. And I remember I told my production team as we were getting ready to put it together, like, how do you want it to go? How much production value do you want? And I said, I was like, I need the first time I do speaking engagements to be basically just me and a microphone. I want it to be a pure experience because I need to prove to myself that like, I can deliver something that's really engaging without any props, without anything, just me.
Right.
And it was like the sense of, I almost hated myself for doing this because you're setting yourself up, right? I'm going to walk out in front of thousands of people, me and a microphone. I've never done this before.
Right.
It could go horribly wrong. But it's like, I almost felt like the only way to do it was like full send commitment, like commitment to the bit.
You have to.
And I'd go out on stage, and with that sense of commitment, I was able to easily do these shows.
Yeah.
And I think for you, what I see in all these clips of you just like blowing people away, honestly, more than the bit, it is this sense that you are completely committed. And even if it goes wrong, it's like somehow he's going to spin this.
Right.
He's got full command of the room.
People love when it goes wrong. So there's that level of why are those traffic jams where you're like, why was there such a traffic jam? The rubbernecking, right? The human instinct that's in our DNA of liking to gossip and liking to see what's going on with them. Oh, look at that car, holy crap, right? Everyone does it. We're all slowed down. We're on the freaking BQE, and what just happened? Why is, like I-78 is jammed up because one jerk was texting.
Yeah.
And we have to watch that. So that same approach is, again, hardwired in our DNA. So in my show, I'm very keenly aware of moments where I can create stress, confusion, or light chaos. And I can make it so that you forget the things I want you to forget. And then I put the camera on the things I want you to remember. And during the moment where you're recounting what happened, I'm telling the story that you're going to remember in your mind. People don't realize that memory is malleable. So we think of his memory as the same thing as this camera shooting me right now, that we could rewind, play back, and it's it's immutable. It never changes. It's on camera,
Right.
right? It's not. People remember certain things, and they are typically related to emotion. So I'll give you a great example. Eyewitness testimony, which you know more than anyone, is inherently unreliable because when people's cortisol levels, adrenaline, they're in a moment where they just saw the shit go down, their body floods with these emotions and all of these things that they're not used to encountering. For most people, they're not into those situations that are high stress. And now suddenly a face, a color of hair, a height, all of that stuff that's captured in 1 or 2 seconds can be changed, especially if you're interrogated later and asked questions and the investigator uses leading language, right? Oh, so when you saw this guy who was like 6'2", 6'3", I see? Well, I kind of maybe, right? You can start to change what they have, right? Imagine you do a watercolor painting and it's not dry yet. I can start to change what you painted. I'm
Interesting.
narrating the story that you will tell the next person about me. And I will get rid of the parts I don't want, just like an editor clips sections out. And I have it so your memory only remembers the things I want you to tell or the story you tell, because the story you tell about me is what continues. It's what makes me memorable. And anyone that ever walks into a room and is the most memorable person in the room will achieve their goals the most effectively. Just think about it in your head. When you've gone to a party or an event and you've met someone, there's always at an event when you go home and you're talking to your wife or you're talking like, man, did you meet that guy? Yeah, was he? There's always a person who stands out.
Sure.
If it's a good party. Otherwise it sucks. You're like, everyone's boring. But what made that person interesting? Now, I think in a lot of instances, it's the fact that the person who's very interesting isn't a big talker, but they're very interested and they bring out the best in you. And you feel like, man, they were so interested in me and they give good stories. And they ask me questions I'd never been asked before. And that kind of elevates a certain level in you where you get excited to be around them. Some people have a natural charisma and you analyze, what is a natural charisma? What is it that they do when they walk in the room? They approach with confidence. They typically approach not a direct thing. So another thing that is very important, body posture, body positioning, and how you walk up to somebody you don't know instantly puts you at ease or makes you feel ill at ease and like they're intruding your space. If somebody walks up to you too close, whoa, bro, you know, what are you doing? Chill out. If somebody approaches you quickly and they're talking and they're not slowing down and you don't know when they're gonna leave, then you start getting this feeling of, oh God, am I stuck in this conversation for a while? Versus, and I learned this doing restaurants when I was a kid, if I walk up to you at an angle and it looks like I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and you're seeing one of my eyes, which is again, the way animals react, instead of head on, which scares them, but at a sideways. And if I give you a time constraint, which is, oh, great to meet you. And for me, performing magic, people might not want me there. They don't know who I am, especially at a restaurant where you're having dinner and you're like, who is this kid? And I was 14 and do I have to tip him? Oh my God, do I have any cash on me? All of these things go through your mind. So I have to take away those layers of resistance. And I learned early on what I could do in those moments that applies to everything in life. It's not just about the performance, it's life skills. And I think those life skills translate very effectively into habits for success, no matter what you do.
It seems like you are, I mean, to simplify, extremely perceptive about other people. Like you're picking up cues that maybe to you seem like they could be picked up by a lot of people, but
Right.
Your ability, at least the way you're describing it, to read people really, really quickly is astounding. And I'll say, on a much smaller level, I actually did, when I was in the SEAL teams,
Yep.
I did a lot of the speaking with locals. Basically, we'd be on target, and then at the end of whatever conflict we were in, there'd be an opportunity to speak to people that were in whatever village we were in Afghanistan. And truthfully, you're basically talking to the men,
Right.
and you're trying to discern if they were just shooting at you or
Right.
they weren't. And it's really hard to tell.
Right.
And a lot of times, even with the interpreter, a conversation's not going to get you there.
No.
You're really just trying to gauge how they view me.
Intuition and instinct go a long way, right? If you have a gut feeling, you have to trust it. Then try to verify it. But if you get that gut feeling and you ignore it, like, you know, that like tickling of like, this doesn't feel right. I'm sure in your situation, that's life or death.
Yeah, I mean, this was like relatively safe, you know,
Yeah.
so we're safe at this point. But a lot of times I would pick up very quickly if someone was just positioning themselves in a sort of adversarial way. Like, I'm sure, I'm speaking to the guy who knows this stuff,
Yeah.
but there's a way you stand if you're almost sort of seeking a level of conflict with the person you're with.
Right.
If you're deferential, you're sort of positioning yourself in such a way. But like, I'm coming into the room, I'm decked out in like special operations gear, we've just secured the target, and I'm talking to you. And if you're gonna stand toe to toe with me
Right.
and like look me square in the eyes, pretty much immediately I'm like, well, this is a combatant.
Right.
You know, whereas other people, maybe they're scared or whatever, but it usually comes off very quickly. And then the conversation, to be honest, it wound up being like irrelevant. It's the first like 3 seconds that I'm with somebody. And so for you, I mean, I have no idea if that relates, but are you like reading people and that's basically your tell? Or are you constantly evaluating people, whether it's during a performance or not, like in your life?
Yes.
Are you constantly evaluating? Like, how does that work for you?
So thankfully the stakes are much lower for me. So I don't ever want to put myself on the category of a Navy SEAL defending our country. It's like what I'm doing is entertaining people.
Sure.
And the skills don't generalize. So the next part is people just say, well, if you're this good, why aren't you just winning millions of dollars playing poker?
Oh,
why aren't you
interesting.
like catching, killers? So it's because, again, this is under the guise of entertainment and the skills don't generalize. Very clear cut. Guessing, I'll give a great example. I'm gonna do this in a moment. But if I were to ask at the table and we're playing poker,
Yep.
just look at why the cards right, because I have a series of things that I do, procedures, to narrow the options down and figure out what you thought of that involve me being in charge.
Interesting.
Watch this. Let's just play a fun game.
Okay.
Picture now a card trick. Right now, if I had a deck of cards, and I don't even have one, I could probably get one out of a bag, and you don't have a deck of cards.
A deck of cards.
Right? You've never seen a deck of cards today, have you?
No.
No. So when I was a magician, we'd have to have a deck of cards right now. And I would do the old pick one card,
Sure.
and you'd put it back and I'd find it.
Right.
But I don't have a deck of cards. So let's just pantomime this, because mentalism is about thoughts. I give you an invisible deck.
Okay, got it.
You mix them up. John,
Okay.
shuffle them up. Let's see the skills, okay? And now
All right.
you take those cards, and I want you to do this. I want you to spread them out in front of you. And spreading them out in front of you means you can see all 52.
Yep.
And you can make a conscious decision, which
Okay.
some people would say later, well, he somehow influenced you. He used certain words, maybe used certain hand gestures. Something was already planted in your mind
Okay.
so that you would do my bidding.
Okay.
So I want to make this even more impossible. Take the cards and close them up again. Give one more shuffle just to be safe. I love it. And now you're going to spread them face down, which means you can't see them.
All right.
Which means that right now, if I told you to reach down and pick any card, there's no way that you could be influenced because you don't even know which one it is now. I want you to slowly reach down and maybe go to grab one and go, nah, doesn't feel right. And you maybe jump to another one next to it or this one and just grab one card at random. Now, before you turn over, you grab it out.
Okay.
And are we in agreement? It's absolutely impossible that I could know what you just picked because it's not real. It's an invisible card that you haven't even turned over yet. You don't even know what it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So you drop the rest of the cards away, gone. And now something happens that's interesting. You turn the card over, you look at it,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
Hold it up, and I want you to picture that card right there. Can you see it?
Yep.
Now watch. I didn't influence this in any way, did I? This is your own choice, 100%.
100%.
And I say to you, hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades, there's all the four suits, there's the high cards, the low cards, all of these different cards. And you had said earlier, blackjack, poker, look at that card. Imagine what it looks like. Imagine the jack, queen, and king have more ink because they're very full. They've painted them. Versus, for example, a two only has the two hearts, and they go all the way through. And you know what you did? You decided, because poker, on the back of the box, ace of spades is the card in your hand, isn't it?
Yeah. What the hell, dude? That's crazy. Yeah, it's the ace of spades.
Ace of spades.
Yeah. It's the
An invisible deck of cards didn't exist. So that, I know
Dude,
it seems.
That's crazy.
Thank you.
I changed my mind like 4 times.
I could tell you did. I saw that, the shifting and the changing, and you're like, I might go with a different. You were thinking of a different spade, but you said, no, I'm going to go back. That has to do with,
Dude,
again,
that's crazy. That's crazy. I was actively trying to subvert you. That's
so
crazy.
I can't do that at a poker table because I can't just tell the guy in front of me, look at your two cards before we get the river, look at me, do this, do that. They're gonna be like, screw you, dude, I'm not doing any of this. Get out of my face. Put on the sunglasses, rock and roll. So in my performance, I'm the director. I get to call the shots.
Wow.
So it doesn't unfortunately work with everything. If it did, it'd be amazing. But to answer your question, I'm not living my life in like brrr mode of like, whoop, that guy. I always think of it as in the Bourne Identity.
Oh yeah.
When
yeah,
he
yeah.
loses memory and he's in that diner and he doesn't know who he is yet.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he tells the guy next to him, why do I know that guy's 255 and can fight? Why do I know this? Why do I know that right now I know the 4 license plates of the cars when I walked in? Why do I know all this stuff? And he's starting to dawn on him. He's like a secret spy agent.
Yeah.
Badass. So I think it's likened to that, where when I turn it on, I'm hyper focused on what I do and my mission at hand. And the analyzing people very quickly is very, very similar to what you did, except it's done for under the context of entertainment, which is when I'm in a crowd, I'm looking around to see who I think will be great for my next trick when I'm performing. This person right now. And if you ask me, why was he so good? People will come up to me at the end of the show and go, why didn't you pick me? And I go, no offense to you. I just, for whatever reason, and it's the intangible, it's the 30 years of training, you just weren't as good as them right now. I thought they would deliver the best reaction and they would mesh with what I wanted. Now in certain rooms, I can't pick the person. You're on TV with 3 hosts, you got to use those 3 hosts. You make the best of a situation. But when I have people to choose from, and if you see me at like a live show, that's very exciting. And the fact that you like throw frisbees, we pick people randomly. If we're in like an arena, we shoot t-shirts to like the 8th row. Who's got it? Stand up, please. And how could I know who would catch the t-shirt? How could I know who'd catch a frisbee? How could you know any of this stuff? Then I work with those people, and that's what really makes it real, because that's anyone. This is some drunk jerk who's like 8 rows in, who's barely conscious. How in the world did you guess the name of his first crush?
I'm still sort of in shock that you just did. So I'm like thinking through how are you doing this? I realize that there's more to it than like here's how I was pretty good at the reason I was the guy that did a lot of the questioning of the people on site is because I had decent perception. I was pretty good at figuring out who likely had more information, and it would like lead to weapons caches or whatever. So it was just like basically I was successful enough that I kept doing it. So I was pretty perceptive. But like,
I think you still are.
Well, thank you. But it's like to be able to break down beyond a gut feeling to like specifics is just where we talked about this thing that you do. When you're making it out, you're very humble about it. Like, you can learn how to do it and whatever it is. But like, no, you can't.
I had to. Like again, I wasn't Spider-Man, bitten by a spider and radioactive, and like I changed. It's been trial and error. It's been iteration, and the same thing that has allowed me to go run 153 miles. That, like, how you have children? We were talking about right when I walked in. We had a couple minutes. I came here from the airport talking about our kids, and you want to instill a work ethic in your kids. It's very interesting because being a parent, I think, is my most important job, and I'm assuming that's my immortality. It's like, who are they going to be? Because as soon as you have kids, you start to feel like I'm going to die one day, and this is my future and their future, and it's like it really no greater joy in life. But how do I instill a work ethic in them? Because my kids aren't going to grow up the same as me, and I'm feeling, I don't know what your beginnings were. Mine were very humble, where I had to work really hard, and I was like age 16. I was supporting myself, which I don't wish upon my kids. They'll never know what that means. But I lived on my own, and I had to pay for college, and I had to find an apartment, and like nobody paid for this stuff. So I had to figure life out early, which at the time I felt kind of pissed, because I'm like, all these other kids are going on vacation. They have a car, their parents. I don't have any of that. But now in hindsight, that set me up for success in a huge way. And it made it so I didn't have a safety net. So I had to become the safety net. And I think that there's a level of that toughness you have to either create in yourself, if it's not, and a lot of people are going to have it, because a lot of people listening to this are, hustling, and they might not have any of these things. So I think that deciding on a goal and not giving up is so much more important than almost natural talent, skill, anything, is persistence. And you saying like, oh, I can't do this, there shouldn't be that word in your vocabulary.
You said something going back to your Spartathlon experience that actually really struck a chord with me. And I'll give you a quick story that I think relates, and I think that it plays into what you just said. So when you did not finish your Spartathlon race, you came back, and you obviously did it, and you successfully completed this.
It ate me alive. Are you kidding me? It killed me.
But you said something to the effect of, when I went into that second attempt, I was prepared to basically die in order to complete this race. So for me, I've had exactly that experience one time, and it changed my life afterwards. When I was in SEAL training, everyone thinks the hard part is at the beginning of training, the famous sort of like hell week, and you're running around on the beach and you're beat down and you're tired. That's bad.
Right.
Not the hardest part. The hardest part comes about halfway through training. It's a 6-month-long course. Halfway through, you're in the underwater phase. And by this point, statistically, virtually everybody in your class is going to graduate, despite the difficulty of this test. It's the moment you all are literally forced to have this moment. And it's horrifying. There's this test called pool competency. They tell you it's just this, you just go in with your scuba tanks and the instructors are going to come down there. You're in the 9-foot section of the pool and you're like crawling around and they're going to come down and just kind of screw with you. And you're going to follow procedures that you're taught to basically, after they finish tumbling you around and turning your air off, you go back on your knees and they're watching you the whole time and you follow these steps. You reach back, you turn on your air, you check your J valve, you check your straps, make sure it's a 3-finger loop here, you check your weight belt. I can still do it now, but it's a procedure that no matter what happens to you underwater, you reset, you follow the procedure. But each problem that they give you, whether it's tying a knot in your hose or whatever it is, gets progressively harder to fix. All fixable problems for 20 minutes. And so each time someone's come down on you, first of all, as they're attacking you, you have to go into the fetal position and just wait. You're not getting air. They're tumbling you around. So you're going about 60 seconds to 90 seconds with no air. And then you need to follow the procedure. So you can see you become more and more hypercapnic.
Right.
You're not breathing. And it's this test of staying calm and following the procedures despite literally being on the precipice of passing out.
Right.
People call it simulated drowning, this test, and you get 4 attempts at it. And so one of the things you got to do is you got to stay calm. And so I went in and I'm doing the test, failed it miserably 4 times in a row. Wasn't even close. Was not even close. Like I actually was the guy that they had to put a pink piece of tape around my ankle, and it wasn't even to humiliate me. I would get so panicked, I would push off the bottom of the pool and go to the surface, but we're breathing mixed gas. And if you do that, you can risk rupturing your lungs with air bubbles. And so you have to be you have to go up at a certain speed. And so there's like standby divers there to keep me from panicking and rocketing to the surface. And so I failed 4 times in a row. And as a result, I actually got rolled out of the class I was in. The class I was with, all my buddies, and they're like, look, we're going to give you one more shot. You're going to leave this class, go to the next class, and you can try again with that class. And so I go to the next class.
That sets you back 6 months?
It actually was just a couple months. They let me start in second phase. But so I go into the next class. And the thing is the students in this class, they've been through the Hell Week and everything, and they know I'm a rollback. And I sort of took on the role of like, I'm going to be a mentor. Like, yeah, I obviously failed pool competency. We're all going to take it here soon. But I really tried hard to be like a mentor. Like, here's what I experienced. I obviously failed it, but let me give you all the insights I can possibly give you. And everyone's looking at me like, oh, John's got it. Like, he failed, but he's gonna be fine. And so we get to test day, and I failed the first 2 attempts, not out of panic, out of procedural problems. And so I fail on Friday. There's 2 more attempts left, and it's on that Monday. And if I don't pass them, not only will it humiliate me, but I'm dropped from SEAL training. That weekend was horrible because I'm thinking about this test. On Monday morning, I got to the pool deck and I was so nervous all weekend. And I'm sitting on the pool deck. They make you sit with your back to the pool, and they made me go last that day. And I'm hearing the instructors like ripping kids' hoses. You're like air bubbling up off the pool. Kids are like passing out like red line, and medics running over. It's chaos. And you're just sitting there waiting for your turn. And then when it was my turn, I just had this mental shift occur where I was like, holy shit, I'm gonna fucking die in that pool before I fail this test. And I got in the water, and it was like calm comes over me. And I begin this test, and it didn't matter how long I went without air. It didn't matter what the problem was. I had fully committed to this concept of I will literally die before I fail this test. And I passed, and it was so easy. And it showed me that like there's a point where you can convince yourself that your mind can sort of override all the discomfort, and you can basically do whatever you want. And you described when you went and did the Spartathlon the second time, that feeling of, I will die before I don't finish this race.
100%.
And sure enough, you did it. And so do you think that's something everybody can achieve, that level of, I will go full send no matter what? Because I think for you, clearly, you put yourself in pressure situations and you just go for it. Like, I feel like maybe that's something that we have that others don't, or do you think that anyone can tap into that?
That's such a tough question because it's so hard to speak for other people. And where mental toughness comes from. And I think you build it up over time. I don't think you're born with it at all. And it's those failures that reinforce later. Had you gotten it on the first try, where would you be today? Isn't that a funny question to ask yourself? Would you still be this person? So when I came back the second time, I had this guy who I saw at mile, like, I don't remember what mile it was. I DNF'd at 78. But it was this bald dude. think he was like from Eastern Europe, and he's wearing this thing, and we're in the middle of the night, and I'm a wreck. I'm a wreck, bro. Like, just been puking maybe 100 times, and now I'm writing my DNF speech, which in the parlance of ultra marathoning is did not finish. They don't write a time next to your name, they write DNF, which is so embarrassing and just kills you. And so I've already written my speech, what I'm gonna tell my wife, when I went to Greece and spent all this money, and my friends who were like, dude, how'd you do on that race? And you gotta eat it and tell everyone, well, you gotta have that story of like, I'm gonna learn from this experience and I'm gonna come back stronger, like all that bullshit that no, you should have finished. And so I see this guy and I'm already talking all this stuff like, oh man, I don't have it today. We're at an aid station together, middle of the night. We haven't slept all night. And this guy looks at me, he doesn't really understand English. And his eyes, he's these crazy eyes where they're open. I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he goes, if you cannot run, you walk. If you cannot walk, you crawl. But you never stop. Like a psycho, like a zombie apocalypse. And in the moment, I couldn't digest it, right? I couldn't take that and bottle it up and shoot it into my vein. But slowly after I left, it haunted me.
Yeah.
Because this guy, like what he had in his eyes is what I need to have the next year. And so that like slowly worked into my DNA. And when I got there, I was you on that attempt. When I started, there was no doubt. There's no doubt.
Yep.
I am finishing this thing no matter what. And when the voice enters my head that says you aren't finishing, what are you talking about? You don't exist. Gone. We go right back to the mindset. I'm hardened steel, titanium, where I'm finishing no matter what. And if that means I'm walking the next 24 hours, puking with a splint on my leg, I'm finishing this race because now this is life or death.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's funny. I rarely meet people that have had a comparable experience to what I described with pool comp, but it's so clear, like for you, this is like a defining moment. And so if people understand that in their own lives, that if your thing is, oh man, I really want to start a business. Oh man, I really want to run a Spartathlon or be a SEAL or whatever it is, whatever someone's goal is, however big or small, if the stakes were as big as they could possibly be, you could do it.
Right.
Or you could die trying. That's the level of commitment that some people need to understand goes into success. It's a compounding effect.
Right.
As soon as I became a SEAL, it showed me that I now have the capacity to set big goals and achieve them, not be someone who claims to want to do things, but then write the DNF story of why I never actually did it.
Right. And that knowledge, that exact way you said, the knowledge that you did it now changes the way your mind is wired. Because now you go, oh my God, what else could I do? And now if I set my mind to it, you start to believe in yourself in a certain way, and that becomes self-fulfilling. So I think for whatever people do, again, if it's inspirational messaging, like my book is designed to be motivational, but it's designed to be action oriented. Like I want to teach people.
Actually, I'll hold it up while you're talking.
How to take action. So like literally the words I used, and I thought about this a lot, was proven habits for success. Because a lot of people think you're going to get this book is that I'm going to teach you magic tricks or mentalism tricks. And the real talk is you can find those elsewhere. So the book is not going to teach you tricks. I need everyone to know because they're going to buy it and be like, dude, where do you teach me what Joe Burrow, how the hell does he throw the ball? I go, I'm not going to teach you how I do the tricks, but knowing what somebody who might have control of your life, knowing when to approach your boss, what to say, and how to get the raise that you've been working for the last 2 years, what if you could do that and up your chances by 10, 20, 30, 40% of doing that and getting them to do what you want? That, to me, is worth a couple bucks. That's worth your time, which is even more valuable than the amount of money for the book to read it. And we got a lot of fun stories baked in there as well from my crazy life.
This book really captures the essence of someone who has put themselves in highly stressful situations and persevered, and they've lived a life of basically pretending that everything is a must succeed. And how to basically, harness your mind. And in some ways, learn how to read other people and influence other people. But this is a very powerful, I'm going to call it a self-help book, because to me, this is like practically a Bible of how to motivate and how to be the best version of yourself. So this is an amazing book. You got to check it out. Read your mind.
Your fellow Navy SEAL, David Goggins, gave me the quote on the top, which says, learn to master the most powerful weapon, your mind, which encapsulates what the entire book is all about, which is your mind controls your success. Whatever success is defined for you, which for everyone is different. Maybe it's monetary, maybe it's romantic, maybe it's want to have kids, maybe it's like, I just want to do something I'm not doing now. And how do you get from step A to B to C? And I know that sounds so silly, but in almost every instance, other people are involved in that journey. And my whole training has been how to win over people, how to know what they're thinking, how to influence them, right? How to get rid of the fear of rejection and failure, which is a huge part of my book, which is mostly what holds people back. That is such a huge factor. And I learned that at a young age, doing like restaurant magic and all those little things I learned how to iterate and improve. I want to give you decades of the mistakes I made, but I want to distill out of them what you can do to fast track your success.
That's amazing. This is awesome.
Let me ask you a question, John. If I told you right now, okay, the book is in your hand,
Yep.
and I were to ask you to flip to any page you wanted, impulsive, spontaneous, in my book, any page you wanted, and look at it and then pick any word, and then I try to guess the word. On the surface, that seems crazy, right? That seems amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm watching this like somebody at home, and I want to go to the skeptic, not the normal person, but the outlier, the 1 out of 100 who goes, yo, but he wrote the book. I wrote the book. So what if I have a photographic memory? What if I know it's on every single page? And if I could see what page you're on, I could say, right, that could have happened. That's a plausible but very improbable solution. So what if instead of doing that, because this is my book,
Right.
Can we just see this room? This is, for, by the way, shout out to your team, sick. The setup here is incredible.
It is pretty good.
For this interview, amazing. I've been to a lot of interviews and this might take the cake.
All right.
Hundreds and hundreds of books, probably thousands.
Yeah.
So if I were to instead ask you to walk up to any one of these books, now not physically, but mentally, if I would have said, walk up to any book in this room, grab it, walk up, and I want you to flip it open to any page, to look at that page, and to go back and forth, and my eyes are closed, and stop at any word. Can you see this happening? Close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, envision that occurring. Did you just play it out?
Yep.
Okay. Open your eyes. Be honest, right? These people trust you. They've seen you for years. This isn't staged. This isn't set up. There is no conceivable way I could know what you would have done. You didn't even know what you were going to do before I asked you to.
Yeah, fair.
When people flip, some people will find a specific page that has a meaning to them. Like maybe a kid's birthday, maybe it's January 24th, so you go to 124 to be fun about it. Or some people just flip to a random page. Now watch, I watched to see the reaction. I don't think you got nostalgic. Personal reference, the page you picked, it doesn't have a meaning to you, does it?
No.
I didn't think so. I didn't see it that way. I also see it as when you just flip, you go, stop. You were quick. You felt rushed, so you rushed. I could see it. You feel a little tense. So some people would, and they would have gone longer in the book. Again, you don't have to tell me this. Do we have a marker? Do we have something we could write with?
I have a pen.
A pen? Okay, I'm gonna close. Is that your pen?
It is my pen.
Okay, I'm gonna close my eyes, and I want you to do this close to your body and on the palm of your hand, and make sure there's no way I could see this and there's no camera behind you. Does it write? Does the pen write?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna close my eyes. On the palm of your hand with no camera, nothing behind you, write as big as you can what page number you went to in the book. When you're done, blow on it, put it close to your chest. Nobody could have seen that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can I open my eyes?
Yep.
My gut says, again, I'm fishing. Did I get a bite? Yes. I reel it in. I think you went with an earlier page. My gut says, because I was seeing what you would do, I think it was 2 digits. Now I ask myself, look at the smile, the laugh, you might as well have said yes. So I keep going. It's so unlikely that you would have done the first 30 or 40 pages because it's too, you can't even flip the page. You open a book and you go, it's already off your thumb before I've even got to page 50. So now what feels like a number that's got like some text, but not, and I think that you would have done right the backward hat, couple buttons open, showing some chest hair. He's more of an odd type of guy than an even. You're not a by the book. I think you might have thought of the number, chuckled, and been like inappropriate. So you wouldn't have done 69, even though that's so funny. You did 67, didn't you? Can we see your hand? Is the number 67?
Yeah. Dude, that's insane. What, dude? How?
Any book, any page, but any word is near infinite. I don't want you to write anything. People are going to say he's got a trick hand, he's got a trick pen. This is your stuff.
Yeah,
don't write down a
legitimate.
thing. Whatever word you saw in your mind in a book, not a real book, you imagine. Throw the pen away. I want you to count without using your fingers,
Okay.
to count the number of letters to yourself, not out loud, in the word you selected, just to yourself. Count it to yourself. Don't say it out loud at the end. Some people, right when they get it, they say it. All right. No, maybe.
I have to double check. Hold on.
Oh, don't even say that. Now you gave so much away. The double check is always an indicator of a longer word. No one double checks a word. Open your eyes.
Okay.
No one double checks a word that's 5 letters or less. No one. So now we know it's longer. Also, you probably would have done a longer word. Nobody does and, the, he, she, if.
No.
Under this level of pressure, no way. We're balling, baby. I think he did a longer word. I think this place, it's got this ambiance of like gravity. And you know, some of these books are probably hundreds of years old. Okay, think of the word. You counted twice. Most people, when they count the second time, they realize they got it wrong, and they realize, oh crap, I counted wrong the first time, and you did that. But they usually count longer and then shorter, and that's what you did. And my gut says you were like, no, it's not. You thought it was 9, but it's actually 8 letters, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what happened in your mind. That's not even. And imagine that you write down the word. You're not going to write a thing. I want this to be all in your mind. You write down 8 letters, like hangman.
Yep.
You reach over and you just go back and forth, and you don't know why, but you stop on one letter and you circle that one letter. You circle one letter somewhere in the word.
Got it.
Did you do it? In the word is how I cue you. When I say that, almost nobody does the first letter. The first letter will give away the rest of the word for a lot of people. And then also in makes it feel like it should be in between. You didn't do the first letter, did you? No, see, I was trying to guide you. And then a lot of people will avoid the vowels because we know there's vowels. You didn't do a vowel, did you? So again, we're going down that path. And now you jump back and forth. You're like, do I do this one? And my gut said you were about to do a letter, but and you jumped over. The letter you're thinking of, no, I don't think, it's not in the word more than once, is it?
It is.
It is, right? It is, because you jump between the two of them.
But yeah.
And what's weird is the first letter you were about to circle, but you didn't. You were going to do a T, and you didn't. You're thinking of an S, aren't you?
Yes.
Swear to them. There's no setup here. This is not staged.
If you wrote this is going to be
literally, we have
mind-blowing.
a book, a room with hundreds of books, thousands of books. You imagine in your mind picking one up, opening it up, and going to any word. Close your eyes. Can you cover them with your hand, please? I want to show them at home because people will say later that I changed what I wrote somehow.
All right.
His eyes are covered. Can we see this from any camera or no? Have we seen one? Open your eyes. What are you picturing in your mind? You flipped an invisible book to page 67. You saw hundreds of words. You stopped. One of them jumped out at you. What was that word?
Chastise.
Chastise.
What the hell, dude? That's such a random word. That's crazy. This is not staged. This is crazy. That's crazy. I picked that because that's the most bizarre word I could think of. That's crazy, man. I don't even know what to say. I'm like looking at other people. Like I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. That is, I got to be honest. I don't even know what to say. I'm shocked. I knew you probably would be able to do this, but this is not set up. But he walked in, and within 2 minutes we were filming. This is, I'm blown away.
Create memorable moments that people take and the stories they tell. And you could chastise me, but you got a story that's going to live in your brain for a while. That's my goal. Is I just put a splinter in your brain.
Oh my
that you're going to try to
God.
pick out for years and be like, how did he know? And I wasn't even going to do page 67. I did that at the last minute. I changed.
That is so wild. What was like your first time doing this? Like your first big moment of big trick with a big audience, and you nailed it.
So I think certain things in life can't be bought, but have to be earned.
Sure.
The same way when you're in SEALs training, there's no check you can write to get that, right? So certain things in life you really have to earn. And so when I did that show, America's Got Talent,
Yeah.
I never expected to go as far as I did. I was truly, this isn't like, oh, this false humility. Every round I was in, I gave it my all, and I didn't think what I'm going to do next. It's just like when I hear wide receivers who at tight ends, when they say, what do you focus on when the ball gets thrown your way? Catching it. You do not think of what you're going to do after you catch the ball or you drop the ball. And so my mindset every single time was this, I'm going to just do everything I can in this round, kill it. And that's it. I never saw, and then, there was no and then, which I think is a powerful thing to do, because as soon as you start thinking and then, you start getting hung up and you drop the ball. So where do I go with this? Every round, at the end of it, it was the highs and lows were insane. Because the highs were like, I just made it through. The lows were like, oh crap, I didn't plan what I'm going to do next round, which might be in a week or two. It's got to be better than this. So it was like these two mixed emotions. So when I got to the finale, this was like the heyday of the show in linear TV, which now people are like, TV, where do I watch TV? Online? This is when like 15 million people would tune in live. Radio City Music Hall, live. That means I am on a stage, Radio City Music, there's 6,000 people in the audience, and this is airing to everyone live, which means if you screw up, ain't no safety net. You don't get caught. You don't go, cut. It's not going right. So if chastise isn't the word, if you didn't think of the letter S, if none of those things happened, I can't get out of it.
Oh
so
my gosh,
finale,
that's intense.
That was one of those moments that was life-changing.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. So you've accomplished so much, and you clearly are somebody that is taking big swings, like you've said. Do you have any sort of like bucket list life items that still are like, I really want to accomplish that at some point?
It's funny you think that, because I think I'm just starting. So like in my mind, I'm so forward facing, and it's something I tell myself on a regular basis to like live in the moment, because it's always like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And that's a problem in life, because when you do earn certain things or have like pinch me moments, I have pinch me moments where I'm like in the room with Steven Spielberg or LeBron, and like you just have this moment of like, dude, just think back to you 20 years ago. If you could go in a time machine, meet yourself, like Marty McFly, and be like, you're not going to believe what you're going to do in 10 years or 20 years. But there's a lot of things. Having my own series, I'm so excited about that. That's been years and years and years in the making, of having not just all these clips that you see, but a show that you get to see who I am, not just what I do.
Right.
So you get a feeling for like, what am I? Who am I? What makes me tick? And hopefully the book too, which is for years something I didn't feel confident to write a book, because I'm like, what story do I have to tell, man? Like, I do these cool tricks, that's awesome, but I started to really see that I think some of the things that I do in my life that are surrounding the mentalism are the actual hidden tricks and tips for success. This whole thing, mentalism, is very fresh and new. It's been around for 100+ years, but I think people are just getting this awareness of it. And it's because of the sports teams, it's because of these things, but they're starting to see like, let me ask you a question, John. If I told you right now to walk up to any one of these books, now not physically, but mentally, and I want you to flip it open to any page, to look at that page, and to go back and forth and stop at any word, can you see this happening? Close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, envision that occurring. I want to show them at home, because people will say later that I changed what I wrote somehow.
All right.
Open your eyes. What was that word?
Hell, dude. This is not staged. This is crazy. I'm blown away. All right, welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Ballen. This was such a hit on the last episode with Tom Segura that we decided we would do more. And today's guest, I got to be honest, they're going to blow your mind. Seriously, I went into this experience sort of skeptical. I mean, the things this person does are sort of impossible. I mean, he goes in front of these audiences, which include huge celebrities and professional sports teams, and effectively reads their minds. He certainly blows their minds, and he does it under so much pressure, and he nails it every time. And so we asked him on the show. He's got some amazing stories, and he also truly I have something written on my hand right now that has to do with one of the tricks that he pulled on me, and it's just I can't believe how this episode went. So really stick around. He's an amazing guy and just a master of his craft.
Today, we have a very special video for you guys. We have a collection of 5 disturbing photo stories, and the first one you're going to hear is totally brand new. And the other 4 are fan favorites, where at the end of each of them, you'll see a very disturbing photo, and each story gets progressively more disturbing as we go. Now, even if you've seen those 4 other stories, don't worry, they've all been totally re-edited, remastered, kind of rethought through, so it'll feel like a new viewing experience. And again, also, the very first story of this video is completely brand new. But before we get into those 5 stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please break into the like button's house and use Rain-X to write the words, "I'm watching you" on their bathroom mirror, so that every time they take a hot shower, they see the creepy message. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. At 4:45 a.m. on Saturday, January 17, 2015, a 27-year-old farmer named Caleb Whitby drove his pickup truck down a highway in southeastern Oregon. Caleb knew conditions for driving were not great. In fact, they were kind of awful. The road was icy, it was foggy out, the sun wasn't up, so it was pretty dark out. But he felt like he didn't really have a choice. He had to go pick up a shipment of cattle for his family's farm. After driving for another 10 minutes or so down this road, so it's just before 5 a.m. at this point, Caleb found himself right behind this big semi-truck who was going under the speed limit. And so Caleb's cruising along here, getting frustrated, and he's thinking about passing the truck. But when he kind of peeked around the side and looked up ahead of the truck, he saw there was a very sharp turn coming up, and he didn't really have enough runway to make the pass, at least not safely. And so Caleb just kind of throttled back and decided he would make the pass after making the turn. And so the semi-truck, which is right in front of Caleb, it ends up making this turn and gets out of sight of Caleb. And then a moment later, Caleb makes the same turn, and as soon as he does, he sees something that he couldn't have seen before. He's seeing it right now that sends a jolt of panic through his body, and reflexively, he jams on his brakes, he loses control of his truck, it starts to slide, and all Caleb can do is just brace and pray that he doesn't get killed. And then a second later, he heard a loud crunching sound, and then his truck stalled, and everything went quiet. But the silence was broken when suddenly there was another crunching sound, and at the same time, Caleb suddenly felt his lungs getting crushed together, and all the air was just pulled out of his body. Moments later, a different semi-truck driver was going down the same stretch of highway that Caleb had been, and he rounded that exact same turn, and when he did, he saw the same thing that had horrified Caleb and caused him to swerve out of control. Except this semi-truck driver, when he hit his brakes, he was able to basically maintain his truck, and he sort of gently hit the guardrail and, crashed, but it didn't cause any damage to him or really to his truck. And so after kind of composing himself, this semi-truck driver got out of the cabin and he looked out at this unbelievably horrific scene in front of him, and instinctively he knew if he goes forward and inspects this, he's just gonna see dead bodies, and he didn't know if he could even handle that. And so he's just standing there in utter shock when he hears this sound, and he knows this sound is something that he has to go investigate. And so even though he was terrified of, potentially seeing dead people, he walked towards the sound, and suddenly he saw where it was coming from. And he just couldn't believe what he was looking at. It would turn out when Caleb Whitby rounded that corner and then saw this horrible thing that caused him to crash, well, what he saw was a massive pileup of over 24 cars just completely blocking the road. And so he smashed on his brakes and he tried to stop himself, but ultimately he smashed into the semi-truck that just moments before he had been driving behind. The semi-truck had also crashed. And so Caleb has now crashed into the side of the semi, and everything's silent for a second. And then another semi-truck comes around the corner. Caleb can't go anywhere, and that semi-truck blasted into the back of Caleb's car. After that, the other semi-truck, the third semi-truck, if you will, rounds the corner, sees the pileup, hits the brakes, but this guy, he manages to crash into the guardrail, avoiding major injury and damage to his truck. And so he gets out of his truck, and he's surveying this horrific scene, and he hears a sound. And he follows that sound right into the crash, and eventually he finds it. And that sound was Caleb. Here is a picture that this driver took of Caleb, of what he found when he found Caleb. It's unbelievable. Somehow, when Caleb's truck was smashed from both directions, it created this perfect pocket of space just big enough for Caleb to fit inside of. And so despite being smashed together by two semi-trucks in this huge pileup, Caleb was basically unhurt. And so when this third semi-truck driver found Caleb, he actually was able to, after taking this photo, pull Caleb out of the wreckage, and minus a bruise and a couple of cuts on his face, Caleb actually was just fine and ultimately walked away. And in fact, after first responders showed up and cleared the wreck, it would turn out that incredibly, nobody was killed. As many of you may know, aside from telling stories on this YouTube channel, I also tell stories on my flagship podcast, the Mr. Ballen podcast, Strange, Dark, and Mysterious Stories. And in addition to that podcast, we over at Ballen Studios actually have a whole slate of other incredible Strange, Dark, and Mysterious podcasts for you to enjoy. If you're into baffling and horrifying medical mysteries, Well, check out my other podcast I host called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. Or maybe you want to hear somebody else from Ballen Studios with a far better radio voice tell you a story, like Luke LaManna. Luke has 2 podcasts under the Ballen Studios umbrella. One is called Wartime Stories, which sort of mirrors what he does on YouTube, also called Wartime Stories. It's like the strange, dark, and mysterious meets the battlefield. And he also has a show called Redacted. It's brand new, and it delves into government conspiracies and cover-ups. It's wild. Ballen Studios also has shows that are just pure nightmare fuel, like Bedtime Stories with host Richard Weil, who looks into cryptid encounters, supernatural deaths, the paranormal, and everything in between. It's really good. And then, of course, we have Run Fool, hosted by the iconic Rodney Barnes, who's like a true pioneer in the horror space. We were so lucky to be able to collaborate with him, and his show, which sort of delves into terrifying folklore, is just one of a kind. You gotta check it out. So if any of these shows appeal to you, make sure you go check them out by just going to any podcast platform and looking up Ballen Studios, and boom, you'll see all of our shows. Make sure you follow along and tune in each week for new episodes. One of the most insane jobs in the world is being a saturation diver for an oil and gas company. These highly specialized divers go down to extreme depths to do construction and demolition on underwater structures. The extreme pressure on their bodies from being so deep will cause some of the mixed gas they breathe to get trapped inside of their body. Now, this is harmless while it's happening, so while they're down at depth, this doesn't matter. But when they ascend, they have to do what's called decompression stops, where they basically stop in the water column at certain depths and just wait and allow these trapped gases to naturally come out of their body. Now, if they skip these decompression stops and just rush to the surface, those trapped gases will not leave their body and they will expand inside of them, causing a condition called decompression sickness, or the bends, and it can be fatal. Now, these decompression stops get longer and longer the deeper you go. And in the case of saturation divers, they'll go as deep as 2,000 feet. And for reference, in order to safely ascend from 2,000 feet, it would take you about 33 hours. And so these oil and gas companies can't afford to have their divers taking 33 hours in between dives, and so they came up with a clever workaround. They built a pressurized chamber system on board ships and oil rigs where their divers would live in between their dives. And what this did was, by keeping their divers constantly under pressure, either literally underwater or in this system, the trapped gases inside of them didn't have a chance to expand, and so their divers couldn't get the bends. The divers would live inside of this incredibly cramped chamber for weeks at a time, getting transported to and from the seafloor inside of this small pressurized sphere that's called a dive bell that could detach from the chamber without totally depressurizing the whole system. At the end of these divers' multi-week shifts, they would do one long decompression stop inside of the chamber. And then when they were done, they'd step out of the chamber and they'd be fine again. In September of 2012, a 32-year-old saturation diver named Chris Lemons was on board a dive ship in the middle of the North Sea. He, along with 11 other divers, had just started a 4-week-long saturation shift. On the 12th of that month, Chris, along with 2 other divers named Dave and Duncan, were scheduled to perform routine maintenance on an oil platform 330 feet below the surface. The North Sea is notorious for terrible weather, but this day the weather was especially bad, and they considered not doing the dive, but ultimately they decided to do it anyways. As Chris, Dave, and Duncan put on their diving equipment and climbed from their living chamber through the tunnel into the dive bell, the captain of the ship navigated directly over this oil platform and then flipped on autopilot mode, which activated dynamic positioning. Now, dive ships rely heavily on dynamic positioning, which is really just this high-tech computer that makes sure, as soon as you turn it on, that the ship does not move from a particular spot in the water. So regardless of the swells and the wind, the ship stays steady. And this is really important when you have divers in the water, because the dive bell is connected to the ship and the divers are connected to the dive bell. And so if the ship is moving all over the place, so is the dive bell, and so are the divers, making it impossible for the divers to do their job. Once the captain had the dynamic positioning up and running, the 3 divers sealed the door of the dive bell behind them, and then the dive bell was detached from the chamber and then lowered through a hole in the middle of the ship into the ocean. Once the bell got down to 330 feet, Chris opened up a hatch on the bottom of the dive bell that led directly into the water. Now, because the pressure inside the bell matches the pressure outside the bell, water does not come in through this hole. Duncan was the bellman for the night, so he would not be going out and doing any diving. He would be staying in the bell to support Dave and Chris. And so he helped them get their big helmets on and connected their umbilical to each of them. Sat divers, when they're outside of the bell, are completely reliant on their umbilical. It's this long stretch of tubes and wires that are connected directly to their suit and to their helmet, and it provides air as well as heat and electricity to their lights, and it provides radio communication up to the people on the boat. Once Chris and Dave were all set up, they slipped through the hole at the bottom of the bell, which brought them down to this little platform that was suspended right below the bell, and from there they leapt off all the way down to the sea floor. Now, sat divers will say that leap from that platform is both amazing and terrifying, because once you leave the bell, it's completely pitch black all around you, so there's no reference point of how fast you're going or even how close to the ground you are. And so it feels like you're just sinking into this endless abyss before you crash into the ground. Once Chris and Dave did hit the ground, they stood up and began walking, and they were directed by the radio in their helmet which direction they needed to go to reach this oil platform. The oil platform was 11 meters tall, and it looked like a sort of pyramid of these big steel pipes. They climbed up the side until they reached their respective working area, and then they settled in to do their job, which they expected to take about 6 hours. At first, everything was going to plan, but about an hour into the job, something went terribly wrong on the surface. The dynamic positioning computer failed. Now, the captain immediately saw it and just expected the backup computer to kick in and take over. But in a terrible turn of luck, the backup computer also failed. And so very quickly, this huge dive ship began drifting in the rough seas, dragging with it the dive bell and the divers 330 feet below. While the captain struggled to try to fix the system and get it back online and get the ship back on station, another crew member hopped on the radio and called down to Dave and Chris, who were outside of the dive bell, and told them to abandon the structure and get back in the bell ASAP. And Chris and Dave could tell from the urgency in this person's voice that this was no drill, this was serious. Chris and Dave were both positioned on the south side of the structure about halfway up, and their umbilicals were running straight up the structure and then northward because the ship was drifting northward. So neither Chris nor Dave could go around the structure. They needed to go straight up before being able to climb their umbilicals back up to the bell. And so both men began climbing, but they could feel the tension on their umbilical was getting tighter and tighter, and Dave managed to get all the way to the top, and he cleared the lip, and as soon as he was on top, he started getting pulled away from the structure. And he looked to see if Chris was also getting pulled, and all he saw was Chris's umbilical, impossibly stretched, still draped over the south side, and he could not see Chris. And that's when Dave, Duncan, and all the people on the surface heard Chris come over the radio frantically saying he was stuck on the underwater structure. His umbilical had gotten wrapped around one of the pylons. And so through the radio, Chris asked Duncan to give him more slack. But Duncan said, "There is no more slack. We are completely tight here. You have to get it free." And Chris would say, "I can't unfree it. It keeps getting tighter and tighter. I can't get it off the pylon." And so Dave jumped down onto the platform and tried to pull himself over to Chris, but his own umbilical was getting pulled towards the dive bell, and so he could not help Chris. And so Dave knew he couldn't do anything, so he turned and began crawling up his umbilical towards the dive bell, and as he's climbing, he hears behind him this extremely loud explosion. It sounded like a shotgun going off. And what it was Chris's umbilical snapping under the tension. As soon as the umbilical snapped, it sent Chris flying backwards off the structure, falling towards the ocean floor. Without his umbilical, he wouldn't have had light, he wouldn't have had a radio to talk to anybody up on the boat, he wouldn't have had heat, and the water was just barely above freezing, and so he would have been very cold very fast, and he would not have had an air supply. Although he would have had 2 backup canisters on his back that would automatically turn on. However, they only gave him 5 or maybe 6 minutes of air. And so when Chris hit the ocean floor, it would have been eerily quiet and totally, completely pitch black. He stood up at some point and looked around him and didn't see anything, but knew he had to get back to the underwater structure. It was his only chance of anybody finding him again. And so he had to make the impossible decision of just choosing a direction and blindly walking, not having any idea what you're walking towards. Choose wrong and you might walk over a cliff. But at some point, Chris made up his mind and just began walking in a single direction, and miraculously, he walked into the underwater structure. He climbed up the side until he got to the top, which was a flat metal grate, and there he looked around and saw there was no dive bell, there was no sign of anything. It was just him. He was completely all alone. And he must have known at this point that he was running out of air. He probably had maybe 1 or 2 minutes left. And so he would have been acutely aware that even if they're looking for him, they're not going to find him in time. He's going to die. And at some point, breathing would have become extremely difficult until there was no more air, and then he would have passed out and keeled over. Back on the surface, the captain was desperately trying to use manual controls to pilot the ship back over where Chris was, but because of how rough the seas were, it was proving to be nearly impossible. As the captain struggled, other members of the crew launched a remote-controlled vehicle into the water to at least go down and try to find Chris. And so they decided they would just pilot straight to the underwater structure and begin looking around that area. And so for a few anxious minutes, the crew on board the ship watched the camera, which was the live feed coming from this underwater vehicle, as it went through totally dark water. And then at some point on the screen, the structure just appeared, and the vehicle, as it went up towards the top, it got a look at the very top of the structure. And on the screen, they saw Chris lying on his side, totally motionless. At this point, he had been without air for at least 20 minutes. In a last-ditch effort, the captain decided to completely power off the ship and its computer and just do a hard reset, something that you would never do, especially in rough seas, because if it doesn't come back on again, you are dead in the water. But when they turned it back on again, the ship came on and the computer system came back online, including the dynamic positioning computer. And so the captain immediately threw it on autopilot and the ship navigated right over where Chris's last position was. After Chris's umbilical had broken, Dave had managed to climb back up to the bell, and he was just standing underneath that platform right beneath it. And so when the ship got right back over Chris's position, Dave leapt off the platform, got to the seafloor, climbed up the structure, grabbed hold of Chris's body, and hauled him back up into the bell. Once Chris's body was inside the bell, Duncan, the bellman, removed Chris's helmet, and he saw that his face was blue and he was totally lifeless. But Duncan immediately just gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And after giving him 2 big breaths, Chris came back to life. He started gagging and coughing, and he's looking around wide-eyed, and Duncan and Dave are looking at him like, you gotta be kidding me, you're supposed to be dead. And after about 30 seconds, the color in Chris's face had totally come back, and he was looking at Duncan and Dave and asked them, what happened? And Duncan and Dave didn't have an answer for him. And so instead, all 3 men just started laughing and hugging. They could not believe it. Once Chris was brought back up to the ship, the dive medic looked at him and concluded that nothing was wrong with him. He was perfectly fine, despite the fact he had been without an air supply for over 30 minutes. And 3 weeks after the incident, Chris was back down saturation diving again. Today, scientists don't know how Chris survived. The leading theory is that it was just so cold, it slowed his heart and his brain down, and that somehow kept him alive. But the reality is, his survival is a total mystery. Here is what the crew saw when their remote-controlled vehicle found Chris lying on top of that platform. On the morning of February 25th, 2015, in a little house in the city of Cape Town in South Africa, a 17-year-old girl named Mishe Solomon was packing up her homework in between bites of her breakfast. And as she did this, her mother, Lavana, walked into the kitchen with a big smile on her face, and she was holding up this beautiful red flowing dress. And immediately Mishe knew what it was. Her mom had been making this dress by hand over the past couple of days. It was for a big school dance that was coming up, and she saw that it was now done. And so Mishe, she put down her breakfast and her homework, and she rushed over to her mom, and she admired this gorgeous dress and thanked her mom for all the hard work and said it's absolutely perfect. And then from somewhere behind Mishe, her father, who was still sitting at the table, kind of grunted out, "Hey, isn't that dress a little bit revealing?" And Misha and her mom kind of just rolled their eyes because they knew Misha's dad just loved his daughter and was very, very protective of her. And so basically anything she wore that wasn't full coverage was too revealing. And so Misha, after rolling her eyes, walked over to her dad. She gave him a big hug and a kiss, and she said, "Dad, don't worry about it. It's just fine." And so after that, Misha went back to her breakfast. She finished eating, she packed up her stuff, and then she gave her mom and her dad another hug and a kiss and said goodbye. And then she headed out the front door out to the road where her aunt was waiting in her car. As Misha's aunt drove her to school, like she did almost every single morning, Misha began to notice her aunt was acting kind of strange and constantly looking behind her and looking in her rearview mirror. And finally, Misha said to her aunt, "What's going on? What are you looking at back there?" And Misha's aunt would say, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm pretty sure there's a white car that's following me. And in fact, over the past couple of days, I've seen what I think is this same white car following us anytime I'm driving you to school. And so Misha just turned around in her seat and looked out the back window, and she saw there were dozens of white cars on the road, so it was pretty difficult to tell which one her aunt was talking about. But as she's looking, none of the cars seemed suspicious. And so Misha turned back around and told her aunt, I think you're just being paranoid. Nobody's following us. There's no reason to follow us. A few minutes later, Misha's aunt pulled up alongside the front of the school, and Misha said goodbye to her aunt. She thanked her, she hopped outside, and she rushed into the school. And then Misha made her way up to the hallway where her first class was, and as she was walking down the hallway, her best friend, Cassidy Nurse, was walking up the hallway in her direction. And so right away, Misha sees Cassidy, and she waves and smiles and begins walking towards her. But Cassidy gave Misha this kind of weird, lukewarm smile, and then quickly looked away from Misha, and then Cassidy turned and bolted into the nearest classroom. And so Misha just came to a stop and just looked at the doorway where her best friend has disappeared, and she starts thinking to herself, what's going on? Why did she do that? That was so cold. And then Misha began to think about the fact that actually, over the past couple of days, Cassidy had been acting really strange. It was like she was trying to avoid Misha, but Misha had no idea why. It wasn't like they were fighting. Normally, Misha and Cassidy were totally inseparable. They had met earlier that school year, and even though they were actually kind of far apart in age, Cassidy was in 8th grade and Misha was in 12th grade, it was like it didn't matter. It was like right away when they met each other, they had this special bond where they just had to be around each other all the time. They shared everything with each other. And certainly anytime they saw each other in the hallway, they would stop to chat or even go into a nearby bathroom and do each other's hair and makeup and share any gossip they had recently heard. So for Cassidy to act like this was just totally uncharacteristic, and it really upset Misha. But just then the bell rang in the school, so Misha knew at this point she was now late for her class, and so she had to forget about whatever was going on with Cassidy, and Misha just hustled down the hallway and went into her classroom. And so Misha, she takes her seat at her desk, she puts her stuff down, and she's getting ready to listen to the teacher, when suddenly the principal comes in without even knocking, and without even saying anything to Misha's teacher, the principal walks right up to Misha and says, "I need you to come with me." And right away, Misha's classmates, all who saw this, they begin oohing and awing as if Misha is in huge trouble. But Misha's thinking to herself, I didn't do anything. I have no idea what this is about. And so she kind of smiled like it was no big deal. She picked up her stuff and she followed the principal out into the hallway. But as Misha followed the principal down the hallway towards the principal's office, Misha's smile faded and she began to wonder, what is this about? What's going on? And then finally, they got to the principal's office. The principal opened up the door. Misha went in first, and the principal trailed behind her and shut the door behind them. When Misha looked into the principal's office, she saw there were already 2 people inside who she didn't recognize. It was 2 women who were very serious looking, who were sitting on the side of the room. And as soon as Misha walked in, the 2 women, without introducing themselves, just told Misha to come over and take a seat next to them. And Misha, instead of doing that, just paused and looked at the women and said, "What's going on?" And at this, the 2 women kind of looked at each other, and then one of the women piped up and said, "Misha, we're here because the police sent us. And they sent us because of a photo that you and your very close friend Cassidy took." But before Misha could ask any questions like, what photo are you talking about and really what's going on here, these 2 women would explain the whole situation to Misha. And basically what they did is they told her this long, very convoluted story that involved Misha, it involved Cassidy, it involved this photo. And by the end of this story, this explainer story, Misha had taken a seat and put her hand over her mouth in utter disbelief. And then when the women were done explaining everything, Misha had a million questions, but it was like she was so overwhelmed with what she was just told that she just continued to sit there with her hand over her mouth, totally silent. And then finally, Misha did break the silence by saying, "Can I please just call my parents?" And at this, the social workers said, "No, you can't. And in fact, the police are already at your parents' house. They're talking to your parents right now. And so you can't talk to them and you can't even go home. In fact, you have to come with us for tonight." And then the two women got up and they made their way out of the principal's office and they said, "Come on, Misha, you have to come with us." And so Misha stood up and she's totally flabbergasted. She really is like, how is this real life? And the principal at this point walked over and gave Misha a hug. And it was like suddenly the floodgates opened and Misha just began sobbing hysterically. And as she did, the social workers just stood there waiting patiently. And then as soon as it seemed like Misha was done crying, they said, "Come on, you really need to come with us." And so Misha, she let go of the principal and she followed the two women out of the school out to one of their cars. And once they got in the car, the two women explained to Misha that they were going to take her to a safe house for the night. But before they went to the safe house, they would need to make a quick pit stop at a local medical clinic. And so Misha, who at this point is not even asking questions, just said, okay. And so the women, they drove to the medical clinic. They were inside for just a matter of minutes. When they came back out again, they drove the rest of the way to the safe house. And when they got to the safe house, it just looked like a normal house on the outside. But on the inside, when the two women were leading Misha through and showing her where everything was, the kitchen, the bathroom, her bedroom, all Misha saw was all these other kids who were staying there who were orphaned and abandoned. And it started to give Misha a panic attack. And she asked the women again, "Can I please call my parents?" And they said, "No, you really can't." But one of the two social workers could tell that Misha, she's having a breakdown. This is the worst day of her life, very likely. And so one of the two women actually offered to Misha to come home with her and stay at her house instead of the safe house. And Misha agreed. And so that social worker and Misha, they would leave together, they would get into that woman's car, and they would drive to her house. And then the social worker told Misha that unfortunately now it was just a waiting game. They needed to wait for the police to get back in touch with them with more information. That night, as Misha lay in this woman's guest bedroom, looking up at the ceiling, wondering how the heck this had become her life, she began to think about the photo that her and Cassidy had took that had kind of started this whole horrible thing. And so Misha began to think about the day they took this picture, and all she remembered was that she and Cassidy were just kind of goofing around and smiling and making funny faces and just taking photos as they went. She certainly didn't think that one of those pictures they took would totally change her life. The following morning, when Misha woke up, the social worker brought her to their office, the social worker's office, and there they met with the other woman who had first met Misha in the principal's office, and the three of them just sat in the office, not talking much, eating chicken wings and other snacks, just literally waiting for police to call them. And finally, they would call. And when they did, one of the social workers answered the phone, and as she listened to what she was being told, she began to frown, and by the time she hung up, she was crying. The news from the police was the news Misha had been afraid of ever since sitting in the principal's office the day before and hearing this whole crazy story about her and Cassidy and this photo. The special pit stop that Misha and the social workers made at the medical clinic the day before on the way to the safe house was so that Misha could get a DNA test. And now the police were calling back with the results of the test. And what the results showed was Misha Solomon was not actually Misha Solomon. Her real name was Zephany Nurse. 17 years earlier, Zephany Nurse had been stolen out of her crib at the hospital in Cape Town, and despite a massive manhunt for her, she was never found. And so this was a huge, famous case in Cape Town, and most people assumed it would never be solved. But Misha's DNA had done just that. It proved that Misha's parents, who had loved her and raised her since she was a baby, were not actually her parents. Her mother, Lavana, was actually her kidnapper, and now she was under arrest. But even though this revelation was incredibly shocking and upsetting for Misha, it was not nearly as shocking as learning the identity of her real biological parents. The social workers took Misha from their office to the police station, where they told Misha her real biological parents were waiting to meet her. And so once they went inside the police station, Misha gripped onto the social worker's arm tightly. She was incredibly nervous, and she was led down a hallway to a door that was shut. And then finally, when Misha was ready, she pushed the door open, and her real parents, who were sitting right in front of her, they stood up and they ran towards her crying. But Misha just stood there, stunned and silent, staring at them. Because these people, they were not strangers to her. She knew them extremely well. They were the parents of her best friend in the world, Cassidy Nurse. Which meant Misha, aka Zephany Nurse, was Cassidy's sister. Months earlier, when Misha and Cassidy first met each other, the reason they hit it off so quickly and the reason they had similar senses of humor and liked the same things and looked so dramatically similar is because they were literally sisters. They just didn't know it. And then one day they took a series of selfie photos of themselves, and Cassidy, she would go home and show one of those photos to her parents and say, hey, look, my best friend, Misha Solomon, look how similar we look. And when Cassidy's parents looked at Misha Solomon, they instinctively knew, that is our daughter. That is Zephany Nurse. And so they would bring this photo to the police, and the police would begin to investigate. And during this investigation, they began trailing Misha. So when Misha's aunt told Misha that she thought a white car was following her, she wasn't just being paranoid. Those were investigators following Misha around, trying to get a feel for her schedule, because they needed to approach her when she was alone in order to get a DNA sample. They were worried if they contacted Misha and tipped off what they were doing, she would tell her parents, who were actually her kidnappers, and then potentially they might take Misha and run away. And so they couldn't risk that. They had to basically follow her around and wait for an opening to get this DNA test done. And so this was also the reason why Cassidy was acting so strangely towards Misha in the few days before the truth was revealed. It's because Cassidy knew about this investigation, and the police told her, you can't tip Misha off. She will tell her parents, her kidnappers, and they might abscond with her. And so Cassidy basically felt awkward and kind of just hid from Misha for a couple of days. The woman that Misha had grown up with and called her mom for her whole life, LaVonna Solomon, was ultimately convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to 10 years in prison. There has never been any evidence to suggest that LaVonna's husband, so Misha's dad for her whole life, actually knew that the baby had been kidnapped, because 17 years earlier, LaVonna had been pregnant with their child. But it's believed she miscarried, and LaVonna did not share that with her husband. Instead, she told her husband that she had gone into labor while he was at work and delivered their child, and so that's how they had this baby, Zephany, when in reality, after LaVonna had miscarried, she had at some point dressed up like a nurse, gone into the hospital, and stolen Zephany. For her part, Zephany, aka Misha, stayed in touch with both sets of parents, the fake ones and her biological ones. And she would say that, she still loves the parents who kidnapped her because they raised her and they treated her well. And in fact, Zephany would actually wear that beautiful flowing red dress that LaVonna had stitched for her to her high school dance, well after the news came out about who LaVonna was. Misha also decided that she would just keep the name Misha because that was what she was used to, instead of going back to her baby name, Zephany. There is still some debate about what exactly happened in this story that I'm about to share with you. And so for transparency, in this video, I am going to rely on the narrative that was presented in court by the defendant. And so with that in mind, here we go. On the afternoon of December 3rd, 2012, a freelance photographer working for the New York Post newspaper named Umar Abbasi was walking down the stairs of the 49th Street subway station in New York City. This very busy station is located only a few blocks away from the very famous Times Square. And so after Umar made his way down to this underground subway station, he walked over to one of the big automated kiosks that looks like an ATM, and he purchased a subway ticket. And then with his ticket, he walked over to the turnstiles, he slid his ticket through the slot, pushed past the turnstiles, and was now standing out on the actual train platform. And from where Umar was standing, this platform basically was like a huge sidewalk that stretched all the way to his right a couple hundred feet and all the way to his left a couple hundred feet. And in front of this platform were the actual tracks down below, because the train, when it came out of the tunnel, it would actually come right up alongside this platform with almost no clearance between the platform and the train. As such, the leading edge of the platform, basically the lip of the train platform that's closest to the train tracks, has this big yellow line painted all across it to keep commuters from standing too close to the edge, because if a train came through, they could actually get hit by the train. And so as Umar is standing on this platform and he's looking left and right, it's totally crowded with people, and they're all kind of tucked back against the wall away from this yellow line. And so Umar decides he's going to turn right and wait at the right end end of the platform, just because he saw down at the far end there appeared to be a gap in people, and he figured he could stand right there. And so Umar begins navigating past all of these people on the right side of the platform, and for the most part, everyone he is passing either has their head buried in their phone, or they're listening to music, or both. Because the thing about riding trains, especially trains in busy cities, is none of the commuters want to talk to anybody else. They want to be completely left alone. And so as Umar is walking, everyone was basically doing that. But at some point, he did pass two people that were engaged in a pretty heated conversation. Umar had no idea what they were arguing about, or if they were even arguing at all. He didn't know who these people were, but he took mental note of the fact that two men were kind of bickering with each other. And so he walked past them, didn't give it much of a second thought, and he arrived at a gap in the gaggle of people waiting for the train. And there he just stood well back of the yellow line, where he pulled out his camera and began clicking through the images he had taken earlier in the day at an earlier photo shoot. And so as he's clicking through these pictures, he starts to notice that those two men who had been bickering before are now straight up yelling at each other. They're screaming obscenities at each other. It's not clear who's fighting about what or who was the aggressor, but it's very obvious that at this point they're fighting. And so Umar looked away from his camera and looked left down the platform towards these two guys. And so these two guys are about 100 to 125 feet away from him. And all the people that were standing in the vicinity of these two men are beginning to migrate away from them. They just don't want anything to do with them. Because the thing about being in subways, especially in cities like New York, is there's lots of people that go down into these train stations that are inebriated or mentally unstable. And so very strange and bad behavior is just kind of a normal thing, and people tend to just kind of ignore it. And so that's what's happening. People are kind of walking away from these two fighting men, doing their best to pretend it's not happening. And so Umar spent a couple more seconds staring down the platform at these two men, but eventually just shrugged and thought, you know what, whatever problems they have, they're not mine. And so Umar went back to his camera and continued to click through his pictures, when all of a sudden he hears a scream coming from the left side of the platform. But it was not a scream that sounded like it came from either of these two men. And so Umar looked up from his camera and looked left down the platform, and now he just sees chaos. It's people running away from these two men. People are running to get away from whatever is happening around them. And so Umar's thinking these men must have come to blows, and they're now fighting actively, physically with each other. But when finally the crowd kind of cleared for a second, he saw a woman pointing down at the train tracks right in front of where those two men had been standing. And so Umar looks at the woman and he follows her finger down onto the tracks, and he sees there is now a man, one of the two men who had been fighting, laying face down on the train tracks. And then, to Umar's horror, he looks up down the tunnel where the train would come out of, and he sees the headlights of the train. It is now coming into the station. And so Umar starts running down the platform to try to get to this man to pull him out of the tracks. And as he's running, he pulls out his camera and he turns the flash on and he holds the shutter down and he aims it at the train conductor to hope the flashing of his camera will alert the train conductor to put on the emergency brake and stop the train before he hits this guy down on the tracks. And so as Umar is running, trying to signal this train conductor, the man down on the tracks tries to stand up, and Umar sees he's really struggling to stand. And when he finally gets up, he turns and he grabs the edge of the platform and he tries to pull himself up and out of the tracks, but he doesn't have the strength or the coordination. And as Umar is getting closer and closer, but he's still too far away to help, he sees that this guy down on the tracks is not going to be able to get out of there before the train hits him. And so Umar finally comes to a stop and he watches as this man down on the tracks lets go of the lip of this platform and just turns and faces the train like he knows what's about to happen. And then seconds later, the train, although it did try to stop, impacted this man and killed him instantly. The man's name was Kaisa Khan, and he was 58 years old. When the police finally showed up, they arrested the other man who Han had been fighting with. He was a 30-year-old named Naeem Davis, and Davis would actually tell police that he had been fighting with Han and he had pushed him onto the tracks, but it was in self-defense. However, that self-defense story didn't stop him from being charged with murder. While Davis sat in jail waiting for his trial, the media and the public at large had already come to the conclusion that Davis was guilty. And this was due in large part to a particular picture. As Umar was running down the platform, holding up his camera, holding the flash down, trying to flag the train conductor to get him to stop, Umar was also taking dozens and dozens of pictures. And those pictures were of Han right before he was struck by